Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast. A very special welcome. Sitting in Monday afternoon, all the way in Vancouver, Canada, Diane Taylor. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Darren. It's pleasant to be with you.
We were just talking before you press record, and we have some commonalities, which is quite interesting. We've both got children of exactly the same ages, 25 and 21. Who would have thought?
Exactly. Meant to be. We're meant to have this chat today.
We are. So very much looking forward to this. You are the founder and the principal consultant at Glow Leadership, and you've had over 30 years in corporate, spending a lot of that time in human resources, or as they now call it over in Canada, people and culture.
They call it both, yes.
Yes. Just like in sales, we no longer call it salesperson. Sometimes it's the director of customer success or the chief revenue officer.
Yes.
But you've had a pretty extensive career in HR within corporate, and now you spend a lot of your time working with executives and teams on how to help them become better leaders and extract their potential. You're also the author of a book by the name of Elevate Potential, a conscious approach to success, which is a best-selling book as well. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
So before we jump into the conversation, I like to ask all of my guests a bit of background in terms of not your life history, but a little bit of a background on your corporate career, and specifically what led you to start your business back in 2013. Was there a specific issue you found in the marketplace? Was there a certain niche you identified? Just a little bit about that, because I'd love to delve into some specifics around what you do today.
Absolutely. So my corporate HR background is about 20 years, and I've worked in many different industries, including nonprofit, high tech, automotive, retail. My very last corporate job was working with one of the largest retailers in Canada, leading a team of 15 HR professionals in the 4 Western provinces here in Canada. And I became an entrepreneur because I knew in 2012, when I was going through major downsizing and laying off thousands of people, closing big box locations and moving support departments to another province, I knew my time was coming. So in 2013, I was asked to cut my own department by 2/3, and I knew my number was next. So in anticipation of that, I thought, what is it that I really want to do? And at that point, I had been a generalist for 20 years. I had the privilege of being a generalist. And in my company, I had developed a leadership development program for emerging leaders. In my career, I was developing like world-class people practices, but I was noticing that without the leadership to guide the people, we weren't able to get anywhere. So even though I had this exceptional high-performing team of HR professionals, if the leadership was not aligned, we weren't going to get anywhere. So I developed an internal leadership development program and absolutely loved doing that, and got such great results that the vice president at the time expanded it like tenfold. And I actually had about over 100 people within the organization within 2 years graduate from that program. Nice. So that combined with my father was an entrepreneur. I have entrepreneurial blood running through my veins. Made me decide, this is my time, this is my chance. I'm going to go do what I love to do. And so I started Glow Leadership in 2013, and it has been the most humbling and the most rewarding experience. But today I can say I absolutely love my clients. I love what I have the opportunity to do. And it's so extremely rewarding seeing the people I work with, shine so bright.
Love it, love it. You mentioned before that there was a lot of downsizing you were going through back in the
Mm.
day. And you talked about it being a humbling experience as well.
Yes.
Just talk about the first, like your experience in the first, I don't know, not so much the first 30 days, but say the first 12 months. Was it was it really challenging? Because I know that when I left corporate, it was a case of, wow, my phone used to always ring and now it's not. What's going on? What is
I
happening?
had the wow, we have kids the same age and we had the basic same experience starting our businesses. It's such a strange, like I say, it's the most humbling thing. I left the corporate world, working for such a large corporation with a large team that nominated me for the HR Professional of the Year. And I was fortunate to be chosen as one of the top three finalists. And so I was really on top of the world in the corporate world. And everybody like you say, my phone was ringing. Everyone wanted to get my opinion and talk to me, get my input. And I thought I would just sail out and my phone would be ringing. Come train us, come do this with us. Nope. And because I do what I'm in the people business, I'm not, I didn't grow up in a sales, role. All of my business has been word of mouth. I have some kind of deep innate fear to promote myself a lot of the time. So it's a growth area for me.
Yeah.
Showing up on podcasts is part of my development for this. But yes, it was very difficult and very humbling.
Well, particularly after companies, like when companies downsize, a lot of people would look at that and say, "Oh, the economy is not going very well, therefore it's a little bit of doom and gloom." So to start a business and go out on your own was a bit of a challenge. When you look back on that, um, was it a challenge at the time, or was it just the fact that the company was going through a phase and it was inevitable that what happened was going to happen?
It was inevitable. I would definitely say, as a strategic leadership consultant, I would say that that company at that time was lacking perhaps the alignment in the senior leadership throughout the company that it needed to succeed. So it was
Mm,
very much one day we're going down this path and another day we're going down this path. Quite honestly, it was a very frustrating experience for me near the end because of the lack of commitment, alignment from the senior leadership team. And, we can see that trickle down to or trickle up to the revenue line um, when you don't have that within an organization. So, um, yeah, I would say it was more the company as opposed to the economy at that time.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
And you mentioned before that a lot of your businesses come through word of mouth, and you're not a self promoter,
Yeah.
which is fine because in fact there's a lot of sales people out there that are very much the same. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting when you think about sales and you ask this question, of people, what do you think about sales and what do you think about salespeople? The vast majority, which is a gross generalization, think, oh, they're all extroverted, they're all self-centered, they're not there to serve. It's all about them, it's all about their product.
Right.
But it's interesting that there's a lot of really successful salespeople out there. They're actually introverted, but they know how to ask great questions. And I think
Exactly.
your background in HR and the work you've been doing with emerging leaders puts you in a great position of credibility, that, and you've probably found this, that the work has actually been your calling card, if you like.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I completely agree that sales is not about having the biggest ego or the biggest swagger. Sales is about building trust and, asking questions and being inquisitive and having great listening skills is, a great way to do that.
Absolutely. So I'd be interested to talk about some of the programs you've run, and particularly the
Mm-hmm.
emerging leaders. I do a lot of emerging leader programs for clients as well.
Right.
Um, and leadership is not an easy thing. And unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, people are thrust into leadership because they've been a great individual contributor. but
Right.
not necessarily given the blueprint, the transition plan, the training, the mentoring to make that transition. And hence, a lot of people end up saying, you know what, this is not for me. If I had known this is what leadership was about and what the responsibilities were, I wouldn't have selected myself in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly. I get, what do you mean I have to coach people? What do you mean I have to be there on their first day and, walk them through this onboarding? I'm too busy doing what I do to do that. Yeah, absolutely. So in 2018, the fall of 2018, I launched what is now called Glow Online. It's the Glow Leadership Signature 16-week online leadership development program. And I developed that in a hybrid format. So learners have 16 weeks of dripped content that they can consume around whatever works best for their schedule. They watch the training video, they complete a downloadable worksheet, and then there's a call to apply in the workplace where real learning and change happens. And so they do one of those every week. And then at every 4 module mark, or the end of each, what I call success pillars, 4 modules of success pillar, we get together in a group coaching call and we share some takeaways so that there's peer learning within
Mm,
that.
yeah.
So this program, was developed pre-COVID. And at that time, there wasn't the appetite. People still wanted the full day in the classroom. And it's like, but the adult learning saturation point is only 3 hours. And oh, what if your people are sick that day? And so COVID was a blessing for me in terms of my
Mm,
programs because people got used to online or hybrid learning
mm,
and understood that they could then train people from different regions. They didn't have to be all, somewhere where they could come to the same office or they had to fly people in for 2 days. So that is my signature program. And then I developed another program called Thrive Women's Leadership Mastery that focuses on women's leadership development. And I also have a program called Activate Wellness, which is just wellness
yeah.
based. Yeah.
Nice, nice. So let's talk about the emerging leaders, and I think the
Yeah.
hybrid is a great, and I've had the same experience. The up until COVID, probably 99% of my facilitation was face to face,
Mm-hmm.
and most of it was a day or 2 days or sometimes 5 days, and then all of a sudden COVID hits, and you're down to 3 hours, 2 hours, 1.5 hours.
Yeah.
And it's sort of moving. I found it's moving back towards more and more face to face, but there's a lot more of
Mm-hmm.
an appetite now for the shorter time zone
Yeah.
sort of training, which is great.
Yeah.
For people listening to this who perhaps are not yet in a leadership position by title, but have the
Right.
ambition to become a leader, and we could talk about this for days and days and days, but
Yes.
love to draw out from you some key principles that for an emerging leader, for a person who, irrespective of the type of business they're working in, irrespective of the type of role they're in, they have this desire to lead people, which is a
Yeah.
privilege and a responsibility and also a challenge. Are
Yeah.
there some common themes or some common things that you've found over the time that you've been running these programs that sort of stand out in terms of you nail these 2 or 3 key principles, you give yourself a really good grounding to make that transition a little bit more successful?
Yes. Absolutely. And what I find is that emerging leaders or leaders that want to move up to a higher level position, they don't really understand what's holding them back from advancing. So, number one is the foundations. Show up to work regularly, show up to work on time. Those things matter.
Who would have
And
thought?
who would have thought? But in today's reality, that's a thing. So, foundational principles of the workplace have to be in place. If those are not there, you're not even going to have a shot. Do your job exceptionally well. Um, and I've heard in exit interviews, well, I didn't do anything extra because I wasn't paid for that yet. Well, it's so that they're kind of reverse engineering things. Like, put yourself out there, try some new things, do some things to show, be who you want to be. Just like they say, dress for your next position.
Mm.
Be who you want to become. So those things. But number one, and what my book is really about, is the lack of self-awareness or consciousness around what's holding us back. So when we're sitting at the table with a senior leader and we're deciding who's going to get promoted, it never is about, well, do they know how to do their job? Or did they take that extra certification, or do they have an MBA? It's never about those things. And that's what people want to believe, that
Mm.
they need to do this or more of this or more of that. It comes down to, does this person have the capability to influence others? And is this person respected by the team? Do they play nicely with the team? And those are sort of the unconscious ways we behave or show up. And so typically what causes negative ways for us to show up are unresolved or unhealed triggers, emotional triggers, that cause us to be weird and come across poorly to other humans. And so people that increase their consciousness and self-awareness and grow naturally show up way better. And those are the people that are going to get ahead. So when someone comes to me and says, I want to take I'm going to do my MBA, I'm like, great, tell me more about why you want to do that.
Yeah.
If the answer is anything related to, I want to feel more worthy because I have more letters behind my name, or I need this to get promoted. Some jobs you do. And
Yeah.
if it's a base, absolutely. But there's two reasons to do it. Number one, you require that. That's a real requirement, documented requirement. Or two, you really love learning.
Mm.
But if it's to make yourself feel better, or you think it's going to get you promoted, then there's probably some other far less expensive work that you can do.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that there's so many people, and we see this on LinkedIn, and I'm not being judgmental of people that do this, but it's just interesting to see it. People who put their LinkedIn profile with their name followed by MBA or EMBA. I'm thinking, okay, is that impressive? No. So what? So what?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So that's, working on your self-awareness, working, and, we don't really learn how to do that. They don't teach us that in school. And that's why I learned that through my career the hard way.
Yeah.
And I've had a long path at, climbing the corporate ladder very successfully, but ending up at the finish line very exhausted.
Yeah.
So I help people now do that with ease.
Mm.
And so that's what my book is about.
So with that and talking about a conscious approach to success, because a lot of people listening to this will say, "Yeah, I'm in the middle of an MBA, or I'm always learning new things, or I have a desire to get promoted, and I'm not sure why I'm not getting promoted." Right? So my experience, and I love your take on this. My experience is when we talk about things like emotional intelligence and self-awareness, some people think about, well, this is quite, it's almost like woo-woo. I can't
Yeah,
measure this. It's not something I can put my fingers on. So therefore, I'm not going to necessarily put my attention to it.
right.
But when you're thinking about, and I'd be interested in your own career around this, the importance of having somebody in your corner, whether it be a manager, a buddy, a partner, an accountability type person, a mentor, to help you build that muscle to become more self-aware, because people who are more self-aware, and we know this, that more companies now are looking for people who have a higher level of emotional intelligence, not just they're smart, that they can have those different conversations. In your career, how important was having somebody in your corner who could be that guide, who could be that sounding board, who could be that person that gives you, I guess, the unfiltered feedback, but it's coming from a position of service, not from a position of judgment.
Right. And I don't think in my career, like in the workplace I ever had that.
Okay.
Um, I think that I established that, my best friend is that, and she'll still, we call each other out on our shit all the time. And it's very good. We both grown our consciousness significantly, over the last, 10, 15 years together. But, to have someone to call to your awareness, but also when you start to develop more consciousness and Mindvalley Academy says that 70% of people are walking around in an unconscious state, meaning they believe that life is happening to them.
Mm,
Only 30% of people understand or are conscious enough to understand life is happening for me. It's
mm,
a very different level of empowerment. Once we transition there, we start to, check ourselves. And, we check ourselves faster, you know, and then we can talk that through with our person and
mm,
say, listen, this happened, and and we talk it through, we process. But for the people that think, oh, that's just woo, this is what I talk about. I say we as human beings exist in a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual realm.
mm,
That's holistic. When you choose, and it's a big thing in North America, we focus on the physical and the mental realms, right? One
yeah.
of the best things that you can talk about is, oh, you're a thought leader. Oh, that's such a beautiful, I'm a thought leader. Well, it's your mind actually that gets you in so much trouble, right? But if it's so when I think about we focus on the physical and mental, it would be like showing up in your car every day and driving your car with only two wheels. It would
Mm,
be very difficult when we understand that we are whole beings that have an emotional state and a spiritual state or a belief in
yeah.
something bigger. Um, and that, if you believe in nothing, you have to believe in your goals and your
Mm,
vision and your direction of where you're going. Um, so any great leader has a plan. So are you
mm,
calling that woo? I don't think so. So I think those, when people are feeling that they need to, check or shift their thoughts, great leaders are very open-minded
mm,
and grow and evolve. In the 70s, 80s, maybe that was woo in the workplace,
yeah.
but we're evolving and we need to get better. And you
Yeah.
don't think the very best athletes in the world that are showing up for our countries at the Olympics use these techniques? They absolutely 100% do. So why wouldn't you?
Because it's woo woo.
That's
No, it's actually
winning. Let's use the W from woo and talk about winning.
that's it. It was funny as you were talking about that, Diane. I was thinking about John Maxwell, and I've read most of his books, and I'm very very fond of what he does and his principles. And he always talks about the fact that the leadership, I guess, approach for him is he might come up with an idea, but he expects that idea to be improved by the people around him, which forces
Right,
them to challenge and critique the idea to improve it. And he says, if we leave the room with the idea that was put on the table having not been progressed at all, then we haven't won. We haven't made any progress.
right,
So it's about how does the idea win, and it's not about who comes up with the idea. It's about development and getting better, which sets up, I guess, a set of principles for people to focus on how can we have incremental improvement, whether that be an idea by idea basis or a day by day, week by week, month by month, month by month.
right, right.
So when you think about this, and let's put the woo, because I fully agree with you that it's everything up here is the biggest thing,
Mm,
and it's not how much you know, it's about how you can actually bring it all together.
yeah,
When you look at people in corporate, because there'll be people
yeah,
listening to this and saying, "Oh man, I should be next in line, but how come Sue over there got the promotion and I didn't? I'm better than her. I've got more better track record than her. How come she got promoted than I before me?"
right.
Do you think people not working on this is one of the biggest reasons for why they're being held back? Or is there something else that combined with this potentially as a reason for why people don't get promoted?
Well, I think every case is an individual case, but if someone is pointing the finger and saying, why did Sue get promoted? And, I'm better. And, when we point the finger away, there's these fingers here pointing back at us. And these are the most powerful fingers that we can ever have. When we go within and say, instead of why is Sue, that's not the question. The question is, why did they not feel that I was ready?
Mm,
Not, am I never going to get it, but this time.
yeah.
Why did they feel at this time that I was not ready? And have a, thought process around what we think. Then, what a lot of companies do poorly is they don't communicate the why back to the person, why they're not getting promoted.
Mm,
But so nothing would prevent you from saying, thank you. I'm very happy for Sue. Would you have 30 minutes for me to bring you a Starbucks and sit down and talk about how I can be ready next time and start to get some genuine feedback to
mm,
get to go for the next one, right? And it's in our losses where we win the most,
mm.
right? So look at it as an opportunity. But if we stay stuck in that unconscious state of the world is happening to me, Sue's getting promoted and I'm way better and this is terrible and nobody gets it and are they stupid? You're probably not going to get the next one either.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
through that process, it builds what you talked about before in terms of that level of self-awareness. And think, you know what, if there's something that's holding me back that I might have a blind spot. So if everybody's heard of the Johari window, there's a lot of stuff that we know that others don't, that others know that we don't, that if we actually bring all that together, it might actually help us make better progress so we can be of better service. So being
Yes.
open, being curious and asking those questions is really critical.
Yeah. And I think you probably have the same experience as me, but in this with the CEOs and senior leaders that I get to work with, we have a relationship where they allow me to talk straight with them, right? Because they are in a position where they know they got there from growing and learning and they want to continue to grow and learn. So
Mm.
they know that I'll be there, I'll tell them the truth. I won't be easy on them, but I'll be their biggest cheerleader too,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
Yeah. And it points back to that confidant or the mentor or a coach or
Mm-hmm.
somebody who can give you that advice, but that advice or that guidance is not to elevate themselves above you. That is to help you because they want to pour into you. So it's not a
Yes.
competition.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And that's what I find in a lot of corporates actually. Even today in the organizations I work with, there's a lot of internal competition, which means instead of leaders looking for, and as you talked about before, instead of turning up and getting ready to work, instead of looking for opportunities where they can serve and looking for opportunities to give things away, they play this other game where I've got to put a ring fence around my knowledge and I've got to try and protect it as much as I possibly can because my thought process is, oh, I know something that Diane doesn't know. So if that is the case, then I've got something that I can use to advance myself against Diane because it's a competition.
Right. Right.
And they wonder why
Yeah.
they
And
don't
those,
win.
yeah, those types of hold on or hold on to information, not share, be the martyred kind of approach. The the person that's coming from a protection instinct, right? So the question is, why do I feel like I need to protect myself? And that holds them back instead of allowing them to flourish. If they were to clear through that and move through that, they would be able to understand that the more I help the team, the more I show up as a leader,
Mm,
the further I will advance.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So if you were looking at, and this is sort of pointed towards the same conversation we just had in terms of getting promoted, building your self-awareness. Um, if you're looking at people today in corporate, do you think the tide is turning? Because I look at a lot of people and think, well, I've got to get an MBA, I've got to have this level of qualification, And we're not necessarily looking for what are the core characteristics of good leadership that we need. So, good character traits, good
Mhm.
people. I want to put them into that position because I know that they'll have the influence over others. They can have those conversations and build those
Mm.
relationships. So, it's not so much about what they know, it's how they can learn things, but also pour into others. Do you think the
Right.
tide's changing in the work that you're doing, or is there still this people hanging on to, I've got to have this knowledge because that's the power?
I do not think it's changing enough. Um, I think we're still finding that the person, in a lot of cases, the person with the most knowledge or the best in the roles getting promoted and not given that support. And then what happens is then there's a failing and it affects the organization, and then that person's moved out, and then it's, worse kind of feelings.
Mm,
I'm seeing that a lot more than actually going back to the root and saying, okay, we have a promotion happening. What skills, abilities, um, type of leader do we need to create success within our organization? Okay, and who are the candidates, and how do they measure up against this?
mm,
And then the other thing is, it's important to, when a promotion is posted or communicated, to communicate what the company needs at this time in this leader, so that, and like I said, for the candidates that want the promotion and don't get it, to sit down and talk to them, right? Because we're in a war on talent. So your B player is probably a really good addition to the team that
mm,
needs a bit of tweaking and coaching. So get your A player and promote them. And when I say A player, it's someone that's very competent in what they do, but are self aware and have a high degree of consciousness.
yeah,
But those B players, do whatever you can to develop them, because to hire externally and to train is a lot more costly than to take these B players and train them and develop them.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good point because the cost of bringing people in, just going through the cost of acquisition, through the onboarding process, and then, if they make probation, whether it be 3 or 6 months, and if it for whatever reason doesn't turn out, a lot of organizations simply go back to the drawing board and they say, oh, well, it's another 150 grand. That's just the cost of doing business versus
Right.
have a look at the talent you've got within your business, look at the potential and start to develop those people.
Yeah.
And there's too many corporates that are not spending near enough time doing that. They almost look for the unicorns within their organization because it becomes easier. And
Yeah.
even with those people, sometimes the A players who have the runs on the board, when they're thrust into a leadership position, because they're doing a slight, or in many cases, a vastly different role, they don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily have the understanding of what it takes to be successful in that role because they've been left alone. So,
Yeah.
you talk about having coaching for the B players. We've also got to make sure we have coaching for the A players to make sure that
Absolutely.
they are transitioning as seamlessly as possible because they're the future of the organization.
Yeah. And the A players, like you say, often get overlooked because l- leaders are spending a lot of time focusing on the problems within their organizations, or performance managing the C players. So A players, invest in them and treat them well. B players, develop them up to be A players, and C players, move them off the bus, because if they're, and you got to use your discernment, and you have to say, okay, does this person have the ability? Like, if I'm going to give it 6 months and I'm going to do this, this, and this to move this C player to a B player.
Mm,
But if in 6 months your C player has not moved to B, it's probably not worth investing more of your time and the company's resources.
yeah.
Right. And the challenge is, C players greatly demotivate A players
Mm,
if they're not dealt with, right? So one
yeah.
of the things that plagues organizations is holding on to and not dealing with people that are not on the bus, or not improving, or being negative, and the rotten apple in the basket kind of thing.
Yeah.
We do need to be have a thoughtful approach for that as well.
That's a good point you make because there's a lot of leaders that, and I've seen this because I was one of them at one point, who are quite reluctant to have those difficult conversations with the poorer performers or the ones that are perhaps not doing the things we expect them to do and not meeting all the criteria. Um, and sometimes we avoid it. And that's another challenge
Mhm.
around leadership is we've got to be in a position to have the courage to have the difficult conversation, if nothing else, but to make sure we're sending a message to the entire team that if we're going to be exceptional, then we need to maintain really high standards and we need to be uncompromising with those standards, which means
Yeah,
if we fall below that, we're going to have the conversation. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean we're going to put you straight on a performance management plan,
right.
but we need to understand that if you're part of this team, these are the minimum expectations. And if you're not up to it, then we're going to have the conversation. But so
Yeah.
many leaders don't have that conversation. So,
No,
what was your
no.
experience in corporate, across many years? How difficult was it? And here's the question I'd love to ask you. How many of the, I guess, the executives and the people leaders within the organization that you're working with came to HR, either to you or to your team, and said, "Oh, can you have the conversation with this person?" In other words, handballing the problem
Right.
over to HR.
Yeah. So, typical processes as a new HR person in an organization, um, leaders would come and say, I want to terminate this person. And then you'd get the backstory. So starting there and then going through a process of training them over, a few years to a point where they would understand that if we coach and nip things in the bud, if we address things as they come up from a coaching perspective, and as if we think we need to move to a performance improvement plan, we call our HR business partner and we have someone to collaborate with that's
Mm,
going to help coach us on the conversation and the right words to use and is going to have our back so that we're not out there alone doing this. um, Things greatly changed for me after I went through that process. So again, having a coach or a mentor or a great HR business partner will help you be a better leader because they can do those things for you. Um, but otherwise, like you say, it's head in the sand until the leader's so frustrated they just want to move to termination, and then it's a risk for the company,
mm,
which they don't like to hear no, and sometimes they'll take a risky move,
mm.
and as an HR professional, we'd like to work with them along the way so we don't put the company at big risk, big
That's it.
lawsuit. So
That's it.
yeah, but having those conversations, I know it's extremely difficult. But if you understand it, if you come at it from a coaching perspective, coaching the person to, you know, communication and repetition is the key to learning. So if you go into the uncomfortable conversation and you say, I'm going in there to coach for alignment,
Mm,
as opposed to I'm going in there and there's going to be a conflict and conflict is scary, so I'm just not going to go in there. It changes the dynamic, right? So that's where a coach can help you shift your own perspective and help you find that courage, help you with the words,
mm.
support you through that. Yeah.
And I think from a leadership point of view, if you haven't gone through a difficult conversation, a performance-based conversation, if you haven't taken somebody through a formalized performance management plan, then I'd say you really haven't led yet, right? Because and I do this, and I
Right.
say this from experience, because it's not, I don't wish this upon my worst enemy, right? It's not a pleasant process for me. It's not a pleasant
Yeah.
process for the business, and certainly not a pleasant process for the individual. But it comes back to the point you made before in terms of having regular check-ins and regular conversations with people. Um, it shouldn't need to get to a formalized performance management. And if it does, then if you've done everything, I was going to say right in inverted commas, but if you've had the
Yeah.
regular conversations, if you've made really clear what the expectations are, what the key triggers are for performance, if you elevated their potential, then that's on them. And that's on
Right.
them because they've chosen not to perform for whatever reason. And then the natural evolution of that will be some sort of performance conversation. But even with that, I've actually made it really clear to people I've had this conversation with that I'm not here. My intention is not to get rid of you. My intention is to get you back on track. Why? Because I think you've got potential. You're just not showing it, and I've got to help you do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But it takes courage because sometimes you get things thrown at you that you don't expect, and
Yeah.
sometimes people blame you for their performance.
Right. Absolutely. That's a risk of being a leader, right? But I think one of the most important things a leader can do is show the team how to win, right?
Mm,
And that means, if we are to look at a team and all the different positions on the team, winning looks different to each one of them. So the more clarity a person has on what winning looks like, how to do their job with excellence, by clearly communicating, repeating communication, coaching your employees in a proactive way, recognizing them and high-fiving them when they do a good job, because what is recognized will be repeated.
mm,
If you coach your team, you're going to win,
mm.
right? But instead of just, oh, now I'm in leadership and I have to close my door and work on my reports, you're going to struggle. And then you're going to
I,
call HR and then say, I want to terminate this person.
I thought that only happened in Australia, Diane.
I think it's a universal global problem, Darren.
You think you get your leadership role, the first thing, do I get an office? Actually, do I get an office that's a corner office? Do I get a real plant or do I have to have a rubber plant? It's funny you should say that because it's all about and when we talk about coaching, I don't necessarily when I refer to coaching, I'm not necessarily saying an official coaching conversation.
Right.
I say to leaders, hey, you've got to be really aware that your every move is being watched like a hawk. That is coaching because you're setting the example to the other teams on how you're going to behave in any set of circumstances whatsoever. And if you can be really conscious of every environment you go into, if you're aware of people watching you, then you can be more aware of what is the best form of action, form of conversation, word, question that I can ask in this particular moment, knowing that I've got people watching me. But I'm not doing it to put on an act. I'm doing it because I want to set the right example rather than me
Right.
telling people what to do. I want to show them what to do.
And I agree with that, but I get a lot of leaders come back to me and they say, I model the behaviors, and that's good. That's half of the puzzle. There's another piece, because at the end of the day, us human beings are egocentric.
Mm,
So it's not that we're selfish, it's just the way we are. So while you're over there modeling, I might be noticing, but probably 80 to 90%, I'm worried about what everyone else is thinking about me,
mm,
because I'm a human being and I'm egocentric. So I might be picking up a little bit of that. So that's good that you're modeling, but you also have to communicate the expectations clearly
yeah,
and not just model, right?
yeah, yeah,
It's the joining of those two things.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Now, any conversation with a person in leadership, particularly in your type of leadership, would not be complete without a conversation around gender. Now, I know you do a lot of work around with women in leadership.
Mhm.
My experience, and back in the corporate days, I used to have a KPI where we had to have a certain percentage of females in our team, which at the time I understood the purpose around that, but I didn't necessarily agree with it. Um,
Right.
Women today in leadership, what are some of the key challenges, even in 2024 and 2025, that women are having to deal with to, I guess, not so much break through the glass ceiling, but to get an equitable seat at the leadership table? Because unfortunately, look at a lot of organizations, females are underrepresented in many of those organizations.
Right.
What are some of the, I guess, things you're working on, some of the insights you've got? Because there'll be a lot of ladies, a lot of women listening to this and thinking,
Yes.
well,
Yes.
how do I make it's such a competitive environment? How do I make an impact, and how can I get, I guess, my fair share of a senior role?
Right. Absolutely. So the first thing is, this glass ceiling we all talk about as a construct. So just
Mm,
push that aside. There is no glass ceiling, girl. So first of all, that. Second of all, what I really sort of have learned in my own experiences, I thought that I had to take on more male based qualities to advance. And in my corporate career, that worked for me, right? However, at the end of the day, it exhausted me and burnt me out because I wasn't coming from an authentic place. Um, I think the best thing that we can do in every human being, we have yang energy, male based energies, and yin based energies. And this is for the men too.
Mm,
Men have feminine energy, masculine and feminine energy. When we create the balance of those energies and we don't pretend to be someone we're not, we become authentic. And
mm,
when we're authentic and when we're whole and balanced, we show up in this calm, um, exceptional way that gets buy-in and will take us to wherever we want to go. The biggest challenge with women is we think we have to be men in the corporate environment, and then we come across very strangely. We're not embracing our divine feminine energy, which is significantly powerful. And, Forbes magazine said in 2023, empathy is the most needed leadership quality. That's typically more natural for women.
mm,
So you know, the other thing, women either tend to lean out or lean in too much. So too much feminine or too much masculine. So again, if we can find the balance, take our natural feminine gifts and learn to have a voice,
mm.
make recommendations, understand that it's business and it's not about us, and we don't need to be, it's okay to have feelings, but we don't need to be oversensitive about business.
Yeah.
Finding that right balance is really what is going to empower us. And the same thing for men. The more that men create this balance and invite some more feminine qualities in of empathy and compassion into their let's get these results, the better leaders they will become too.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
means what we're saying is the biggest work we have to do is work on ourselves and
Yes.
continuing to build our level of conscious awareness around
Yes.
what our strengths are. And I don't like to talk about weaknesses, but I more talk about what are the areas for development, what are the things that are
Yes.
not
Me
necessarily
too.
strengths yet, and then harness those. And
Yes.
don't, and this is probably the biggest one from my perspective, is don't fall in the trap of comparing yourself or feeling as if you have to compare yourself to other people because we're all individuals and you're perfectly okay the way you are. Just extract the best potential for you so you can be the very best you can be in your
Yes.
particular role.
Yes, absolutely. We tend to want to emulate people we respect or that are successful. But what happens when we do that rather than show up as our best versions of ourselves is we are showing up as a wolf in sheep's clothing. And
Mm,
that people don't trust us. They can sense something's not right and it decreases trust. Well,
yeah,
trust is the most important thing in any relationship, whether you're selling or whether you're working with internal people within your organization or your family or your friends.
yeah,
Any type of relationship, trust is the foundational piece.
yeah.
So we want to discover who we are and show up as our best versions of ourselves.
And if you do that, then you know what? You then, and I talk about this in selling a lot, then remove yourself from any pressure of having to get the perfect outcome because the outcome will be the outcome. And you focus on what you
Exactly.
have control over. And what you've got control
Yes,
over is how you bring yourself to this particular moment, what you say, how you feel, what impression you create, etc.
exactly.
Love it.
Yes.
So, Diane, hey, fabulous conversation. If there was one thing looking into 2025, we're in the beginning of the year, a couple of weeks in. Is there a certain, not so much a theme for you, but is there something that you're looking forward to this year, whether it be a key market challenge you've identified or something you're working on that is going to be almost like a, a North Star for you that people can benefit from?
So I encourage all my clients to choose a word of the year that sets a tone that is intentional rather than just resolutions. Like I like people to have 3 goals per quarter, but an overarching word of the year is, so if let's say that in 2030 I was to say, Darren, what was 2025 about for you?
Mm.
So my 2025 word is shine.
Shine.
And my challenge, like I said earlier, I'm not great at sales, or I get so much reward in helping other people shine bright. But in order to help more people, I need to show up and shine myself to reach them.
Yeah.
So that's what 2025 is about for me. I'm going to be contacting a lot of conferences about keynote speaking opportunities, continuing to promote my book, and continuing to do the best work possible with my clients.
Brilliant. Love it. And I see on
Yeah.
the table behind you, you got Shine Bright there as well, which is
Yes.
perfect.
Yes.
Love it. Love it. So Diane, for people listening, they'd like to connect with you, learn more about what you do, and get a copy of your book. Where's the best place for them to do that?
Um, my website, www.glowleadership.com. You can learn all about my offerings there. You can follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Glow Leadership. If you want to contact me directly, Diane at glowleadership.com. And my book, Elevate Potential, A Conscious Approach to Success, is available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and can be ordered in any bookstore around the world.
Any bookstore.
Any
Oh,
bookstore.
truly global.
It is.
And of course, you forgot to mention LinkedIn as well.
Oh, and yes, of course, LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. Diane Taylor 888 is my LinkedIn.
Diane Taylor 888. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
I'll put the notes, I'll put the
Thank
links
you.
in the show notes. So that's cool. Hey, thank you so much. It's been a little bit of time for us organizing this. So I do appreciate you jumping on. Really enjoyed today's conversation. I want to thank you for being a guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Thank you so much, Darren. I really enjoyed our conversation.
All the best. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.